April 15th, 2026, early morning across a front line stretching more than 1,200 kilometers in eastern Ukraine. Russian assault units are moving again. Columns advance. Artillery crews prepare. This is the moment Moscow has been building toward for months. A spring offensive designed to break Ukrainian defenses and force a collapse in the Donbas. But something is off. Because in the same moment this offensive begins, Ukraine is not falling back. It is moving forward. 50 kilometers of territory taken back in just weeks. At the same time, Russian casualties surged past 35,000 in a single month, the highest confirmed rate of the war so far. This is not a stalemate. This is a shift. They were wrong. Ukraine is no longer just holding the line. It is reshaping the battlefield using drones, precision strikes, and a doctrine its own commander calls active defense. If these numbers hold, this is not just a bad month for Moscow. It may be the start of something much bigger. So the question becomes simple. Is this just a temporary setback for Russia, or the moment the momentum of the war quietly changed direction? The first signs appeared before sunrise. Satellite feeds updated. Drone cameras scanned the ground. Thermal signatures moved slowly across open terrain. By mid-March, Ukrainian analysts had already identified the pattern. Russian forces were no longer probing, they were committing. Attacks increased across multiple directions, including Lyman, Donetsk, and Zaporizhia. On paper, the logic was simple. Russia still held the advantage in numbers. More troops, more artillery, more pressure applied across a wide front. But the battlefield had changed. Ukraine was not reacting blindly. It was watching in real time. Through a cloud-based system known as Delta, Ukrainian forces combined data from drones, reconnaissance units, and forward observers. Movements were tracked, heat signatures were recorded, supply routes were monitored continuously. Patterns began to form. Russian units advancing into areas where control was thin, supply lines stretching further than they could safely support, positions that looked stable on a map but were fragile in reality. Ukraine did not need to attack everywhere. It only needed to attack the right places. At the same time, a deeper campaign was already underway behind Russian lines. Over the previous months, Ukraine had carried out hundreds of strikes against Russian air defense systems. Each strike reduced Russia's ability to protect its rear positions. Every radar system destroyed created a gap. Every launcher lost opened a corridor. Through those corridors, Ukraine began to deploy a new layer of warfare. Mid-range drone strikes targeting ammunition depots, fuel storage, and command centers inside occupied territory. These strikes were not random. They were calculated. The objective was not simply to stop the offensive, it was to weaken it before it fully developed. At the same time, Russian recruitment rates were falling behind battlefield losses. Fewer soldiers meant thinner defensive lines. And thinner lines create opportunities. By the time the spring offensive intensified, Ukraine had already reshaped the battlefield. That shift had a name: active defense. Not waiting, not reacting, but forcing the enemy to fight under pressure, in the wrong places at the wrong time. And once that decision was made, everything started to move. The first contact did not happen everywhere. It happened in the gaps. A sector where Russian units had pushed forward just enough to claim control, but not enough to secure it. Early morning, limited visibility, drone feeds flickering across Ukrainian command screens. Then a signal appeared. A small cluster of Russian troops moving along a tree line, vehicles spaced out, minimal cover. On their side, it looked like progress. On Ukraine's side, it looked like an opening. Within seconds, coordinates were marked. A drone adjusted its position. Another locked onto a moving vehicle. The first strike hit fast, a direct impact on the lead element. Flame rose. Shock spread. The column stopped. The second strike followed almost immediately. More precise. More controlled. This was not random fire. This was targeting. Above the battlefield, more drones were already in position. Some watching, some waiting, some armed. Russian units tried to disperse, but movement made them visible. And visibility made them vulnerable. Within minutes, the engagement shifted. What started as a forward push became a defensive scramble. Radios filled with fragmented calls, units repositioned without a clear picture of where the threat was coming from. Because the threat was not coming from one direction, it was everywhere. Low-altitude drones closing in, loitering munitions circling above, artillery adjusting based on live feedback. For a brief window, Russian systems attempted to respond, but the reaction came too late. The damage was already done. This pattern repeated across multiple sectors, small, precise engagements targeting weakness and forcing constant adaptation. Then something changed. New signals appeared, faster movement, a heavier response. Reinforcements were coming, and this time the fight was about to become far more complex. By the time reinforcements arrived, the battlefield was already unstable. Russian command pushed more units forward, more armor, more artillery. The assumption was simple: apply pressure and regain control. But the battlefield was no longer predictable. As new units moved into position, Ukrainian systems were already tracking them, movement patterns analyzed in real time. Then the second phase began. A decoy drone appeared first, easy to detect, easy to engage. Russian air defense responded immediately. Radar locked, missiles launched. For a moment, it looked successful. But that was the point. While attention was focused upward, the real strike moved in. Low altitude, fast, difficult to detect. Within minutes, multiple positions were hit, ammunition sites ignited, fuel reserves burned, secondary explosions followed. Each strike reduced Russia's ability to sustain pressure on the front. The imbalance was clear: lower cost systems forcing high-value defensive responses. At the same time, deeper strikes continued. Command centers disrupted, supply routes damaged, coordination slowed. Russian units at the front began to feel the effect. Some advanced without support, others held position without clear orders. And in that confusion, Ukraine applied pressure again. Not everywhere, only where it mattered. Short advances, controlled objectives, territory taken step by step. No single dramatic breakthrough, but a steady shift. Russia was no longer dictating the pace of the fight. It was reacting to it. By the end of March, the numbers told a very different story. 50 kilometers of territory retaken, more than 35,000 Russian casualties in a single month. And for the first time in years, Russian advances across the front slowed to almost nothing. This was supposed to be the start of a breakthrough. Instead, it became a turning point. But the real impact goes beyond territory. What Ukraine demonstrated was adaptation, a system that learns, adjusts, and improves under pressure. Drones played a major role, but they were only one part of a larger system. Real-time intelligence, precision targeting, coordinated strikes across multiple layers, all working together to offset a larger force. At the same time, Russia continued to rely on mass and attrition. More troops, more pressure, more attempts to overwhelm. But over time, that approach becomes harder to sustain. Recruitment falls behind losses, units stretch thinner, gaps begin to appear. And once those gaps appear, they can be exploited. Ukraine is not chasing a single decisive victory. It is shaping the battlefield step by step, weakening the system from within, then striking where it matters most. If this trend continues, the implications are significant. Because when speed, data, and adaptation begin to outweigh numbers, the balance of power starts to shift. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. And sometimes that kind of shift is the one that changes everything.